it's important, I think, for potential patients to figure out what philosophy they want to pursue for their health. What I ask is a lot of lifestyle change, behavior change, taking out all the fun stuff that people are addicted to, sugar, gluten, grains, dairy, in cases of adults, alcohol, caffeine, packaged processed foods. Dr. Wu, I think, because it's named Husha Wu, was kind of like an aging man in the village, and he's getting gray, and nobody wanted to be around him and nobody wanted to be his friend. I'm butchering the story, but this is the gist of it. And so he kind of was cast off into the woods, and he started eating this root, and his hair went from gray to black, and he returned a young, vibrant man with dark hair. I got sick like a lot of the people I know, and I went to my conventional doctors, and they kind of didn't do very much for me, and I found myself getting worse and deteriorating. And I had to find different approaches just to survive.
Dr. Ryan Monahan, welcome to Elevated Conversations. We're loving the background from there in Topanga, and listen, welcome. It's great to have a chat to you today.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
So tell us about yourself. You're in Topanga. How did you get into the work that you're doing now with your clients? You're doing great work. We had a look over your website. We see that you really double down into the root causal emotion as to why the body's moving through stresses and negative health issues at the time. And a lot of our community are very much about that. This energy, this emotion, this fuel that we're putting into our body. We'd love to hear your story into how you walked into this awakening kind of realm with the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I got sick like a lot of the people I know that ended up on this path. Kind of, you get called into it whether you like it or not, and I kind of got dragged into it just because I got sick, and I went to my conventional doctors, and they gave me their antibiotics and Prilosec, and kind of didn't do very much for me, and I found myself getting worse and deteriorating, and I had to find different approaches just to survive. And I was referred to simultaneously an acupuncturist by one person and a functional medicine doctor by a different person. And I started working with both of these people simultaneously, and a lot of my symptoms were relieved within weeks. And then within kind of 6 months to a year, I had gone through quite a transformation physically and energetically and spiritually, and it just was very expanding for me, and it felt very purposeful and important. What I was doing at the time did not feel purposeful and important. It was kind of like a corporate job type thing, and I just became fascinated by why this worked and other conventional approaches didn't work. And so I started going to classes, just open enrollment classes for Eastern medicine to learn more, reading books, and then decided this was the path I wanted to pursue. It felt important to me and I felt called to it. So I went back to school, got my master's and doctoral in Eastern medicine, and then I did a few years of functional medicine school and kind of combine those things that helped me. And like you said earlier, just both very root-based, holistic approaches to healing through different lenses. The Eastern approach, very, old, 5,000 years old, and, using, kind of ancient diagnostics and herbs and techniques that are, I think, amazing and natural and safe and effective. And then the functional approach is kind of bringing that same lens, but adding in like very advanced modern lab work, blood, urine, saliva, stool, breath, all these specimens that we can analyze and find all these data points to work with. So I really like to combine the two in my approach.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. What I've really caught from that, what out of interest was your corporate job? Like, what were you in before? Were you like marketing management? What was it? HR? What were you in?
Marketing. Yeah, it was the first guess. Very good guess. Yeah, I was a copywriter in marketing in San Francisco. So
what I love about that is it's so different to what you're doing now. Like the first thing I do is I catch on to that because, like, as soon as we started talking today, I could work out, you loved what you do and, you're enjoying your life. And there is this overarching theme that often we hear, wherever we look for information, but usually it says something along the lines of follow your passion, live your highest excitement, do something that really interests you rather than following a career or something that you have to do. And have you found that since the career shift, the fulfillment, the spark, the energy, the drive to work, so to speak, comes so much more easily rather than the old career path? Have you noticed a shift there?
absolutely. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. All my free time is spent studying and researching and learning more. It's kind of endless. Once you get the foundational pieces in place, you can continually stack new knowledge on top of it, and it's just fascinating to me. So, yeah, it's very passionate and purposeful to me. It's not like a job that I clock in and clock out for, like, my corporate job. I just didn't know what I was doing. I was right out of college. I just needed a job to make some money and just fell into it because I got hired, right? So this was really finding, I think, my purpose. And like I said, I kind of got dragged into it just through my own health issues, but it was, a blessing in disguise in that way, because yeah, I just love it so much. And this was back in like 2007 when things started getting going. And since then, I think the focus on health and wellness has it kind of blown up so much more, and it's a great time to be offering different approaches to taking care of your body, because I think we need that now more than ever.
Yeah,
I agree. Like my journey, by 21 I had cervical cancer. Before any healing, it was I believe a case of the environment and the energy from my inner child, like from my childhood environment, and that trauma and density kind of created that physical density in my body. And so it wasn't until 2009 when we had our awakening that I'm joining all the dots backwards. I went down the conventional path into hospital, but when I went to have kids, I also struggled to have kids with different issues down there, and ovulation issues, releasing eggs and letting go. And now I see it and I understand it so much more from this vantage point. From, in hindsight, we often put it all together. But in your work with women and, conceiving children and having children, the approach of a holistic, balance with like a naturopath and what diet, and like you said before, doing the testing, the blood analysis, the stool testing. I went through all of that with my naturopath and we fell pregnant. So it is definitely inspiring to hear this, because I know it's a problem globally with falling pregnant and wanting to have a family, and so many women are struggling with knowing what to do, what are the answers, and being guided by the system is not always the only option. So could you help us understand some, in your experience, if you've worked with any patients like that, and some key pointers for the women that's listening to this?
Yeah, I work with women on fertility all the time. And then it's just a perspective of what you define fertility as. So it's important, I think, for potential patients to figure out what philosophy they want to pursue for their health and wellness and their body. The more conventional approach might focus, more exclusively on hormones, FSH, LH, other hormones, just to, get your body into that pregnancy mode. But to me, fertility is more holistic than that. You need to create a body that is ready to carry life, and that requires clearing out toxins and pathogens and inflammation and imbalances, and really flooding it with nutrients and vitamins and minerals and amino acids and fatty acids and all these things that are used to grow a new human being. So in my experience, what I see in patients I work with who have infertility issues, there's underlying imbalances that need to be addressed. It's not about injecting hormones to kind of trick the body into thinking it's a safe place to have a baby. It's about creating an actual safe place to have a baby. And if you trick your body into it, I think you're missing some underlying imbalances potentially that could maybe weaken the growth of the child and lead to some, developmental issues later on. Whereas if you put the body in position to be as healthy as possible, as robust as possible, clear out all the bad stuff, replete all the good stuff, you'll have a very strong, healthy pregnancy, very healthy child, and then you'll be healthy after giving birth as well. So yeah, I like to work with patients like a year in advance of them getting pregnant to like prepare their body, right? And that requires a lot of work. Like I do a lot of labs to look for infections, viruses, bacteria, parasites, heavy metals, toxicants, the list goes on. Get all that out of the body. That takes some time, 3, 6, 9 months. And then really replete all their deficiencies. Everyone I've ever worked with has a lot of deficiencies, nutritional deficiencies. And we know these are essential for a growing baby to be healthy, right? You have to have enough for you, the mother, then also extra for the baby to be healthy. So, and then reducing systemic inflammation is a huge part of it too. I think functional medicine, if anything, it's just in a sentence, reducing systemic inflammation, and that has a huge impact in every system and every level. So yeah, it's about philosophy and what you're trying to accomplish. If you want to create like a really healthy, sound, balanced body to get pregnant in, I think that's the right approach. And that's kind of the approach that I offer my patients.
That's great. That's very helpful, because I think a lot of women are just relying on the system, and because they don't know what to do. And I was very asleep to all of this, holistic kind of approach. And we ended up doing holistic and the IVF path as well. But I had to prepare the environment, like you said, which was not ready. and that's how we were able to conceive. And it did definitely showed me that, every time there was an embryo transfer, if I hadn't prepared the environment, like acupuncture and the herbs and the diet and, balancing myself, there was it wasn't what's it called? A conversion. Yeah, a pregnancy. So I learned that, and I learned how sensitive our bodies and our systems truly are with this type of thing. So moving into this like health approach and having our system as strong, and a lot of us are very delicate, and I think we all overlook the delicacy of the human being and the body and the system because we're so all caught in the head. What are some other major health things that people are coming to you with to correct in these days at the moment? With we're looking into the diet of a lot of Americans, and we spent some time in America and we were like, wow, like, yeah, you've got to be careful with what you're putting in because there's not that much options.
It wasn't easy to eat healthy.
No, it wasn't. It was not easy, and it was very expensive to eat healthy as well. So look, you got to do the best with what you've got, but what are some things that people are coming to you right now with challenges with that maybe listeners can take and move forward to correct?
Yeah, I see patients for all sorts of things, but some of the things that come to mind, top of list, a lot of gut imbalances. Functional medicine's amazing for treating the gut, which is really the foundation of health from a functional perspective. So, whether that's bloating or weight gain or, IBS type symptoms, and then a lot of mood imbalances, things like anxiety, depression, OCD, the list goes on. And interestingly, a lot of those relate to the gut too, with the gut-brain connection. And then, like patients trying to get pregnant, like I mentioned, a lot of like PCOS, endometriosis patients, thyroid patients, some cardiovascular patients. The last 4 years has been really heavy with post-COVID syndrome patients who are experiencing a lot of nervous system dysregulation and immune system dysregulation, and they have all sorts of symptoms, like POTS and they're stuck in bed, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. I work with a lot of mold patients on clearing mycotoxins. All kind of all over the place, but that's
My
those are
goodness.
Yeah.
The
few
list goes on
examples.
and on.
One of the things we noticed, Ryan, when we were in LA and we were speaking to people, is they were talking about the prevalence of drugs that I hadn't heard of here in Australia. The big one was Adderall. Lots of people talking about being on Adderall. I didn't even know what Adderall was. And the other one was, is it a Ozempic or something?
Yeah, semaglutide. Yeah, the Ozempic's the kind of brand name or whatever, but yeah, there's a few of those. Adderall is I get a lot of patients coming in. They've been taking Adderall for a long, long time, and they don't want to keep taking it. But it's basically pharmaceutical speed. It's hard to come off of. You become very reliant and dependent on it. So
Wow.
really, again, yeah, it's not something you can just stop. Unfortunately, it's something you have to kind of work on balancing the body to make the body strong and not so reliant on it, and then slowly wean off over time if you're ready to do that. So yeah, I work with a lot of patients that are taking Adderall. It's true, yeah, it's pretty widespread. A lot of people do take it. They get put on it usually younger because they aren't doing well in school or some kind of attention deficit disorder type thing. And those really in my line of work at least are viewed very differently. What I see, because I do work with children too, I'll see kids come in with that type of diagnosis, and they're actually hugely overgrown in the gut with candida and fungus. They're deficient in all the nutrients. They have high levels of heavy metals, imbalances in their omegas, and like there's all sorts of things wrong, really, and that's why they're displaying those symptoms. And if you fix all those things, those symptoms go away, and they don't have to be on medications for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. So yeah, and then Ozempic is wild. The first time I heard of it,
I
I
know what
kind
that
of
is.
I think it's a weight loss one, right?
It's a weight loss drug. Well, it's a diabetes drug, but it's being used for weight loss. And yeah, yeah, it has a lot of side effects. I know some patients, personally, that have their like gallbladders removed because of being on it, and it can be very damaging to the gut. I think there's a new study saying that it can reform the small intestine in a bad way that is irreversible. That's a major organ in your body that absorbs nutrients from food. So yeah, it's a lot of people seem to be taking it, and I think there's going to be side effects for a lot of them down the road. It's not really the approach that I would recommend.
Yeah, and it's another thing I really noticed was because you notice these things. It's like when you're from out of town and I'm sitting in LA and I'm watching your TV. I'm thinking, look at all these ads for pharmaceuticals because we don't have it in Australia. Like there isn't all of those advertisements for whatever it is, right? All the different rashes and heart conditions and lung conditions and this and this and this. And then right after it is the ad for Kentucky Fried Chicken or BK, Burger King or whatever it is. And it really seems like, and it's a shame because it's the same with parents and their kids, but for a lot of people, they would prefer to take some sort of medication or pharmaceutical and be able to just eat whatever they want rather than watch what they eat and put a little bit of energy and effort into caring for their vehicle, right? Instead of putting cheap, crappy oil into it, like put some high grade quality natural stuff rather than that. But for some people, it seems like they'd rather just treat the symptom than work on the cause. It seems like they don't want to hear it. I'm guessing by the time the person gets to you, they're already willing to take responsibility. But is that a fair observation for a lot of people in the United States?
Completely fair observation. I think the same thing. I don't watch too much TV, but sometimes when I do, I have the same thought when I'm forced to sit through some of these commercials. It's exactly what you described. At first, it's going to be something unhealthy, a drink or a food. And then it's going to be a drug that will mask the symptoms caused by, a lot of these dietary choices. And diet's a huge part of what I do with my patients. You have to move them onto an anti-inflammatory diet and take out all the processed packaged foods and all that stuff that's making people sick. And that is kind of a way that I think many Americans are conditioned growing up is do what you want, eat what you want. There's a drug for it, here. And that's kind of our approach to like healthcare and healing is just put somebody on a drug. So that's why I think it's important to have another approach that looks at a deeper root cause and looks for, more and more of the imbalances and addresses them rather than just palliatively using drugs to, suppress symptoms. I think that's a totally accurate observation. And I think the US and maybe New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that allow advertising of pharmaceutical drugs on television. And I think it would be wonderful if that were not the case. I think
and the health insurance comes after the sugar drink. And if all else fails, we've got it under the health insurance.
And that doesn't work very well either, that system. No. So anybody that tries, you pay a lot of money, you don't get a lot out of it. So
no.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I'd like to go into the ADHD and to understand it for these children because it's very common. Fortunately, our children haven't had to cross any journeys like that, but our close family kids have. And we see a lot of kids at the school that are getting these Ritalin tablets in order to keep them focused in the classroom. And, we're very much let them be free, let them bounce around, like that's us. But obviously there's a driving force from diet, probably their upbringing, their environment. Of course, we know the emotional imbalances of the parents and that can impact a child's health. So,
and their learning
stuff. Yeah. So can we deep dive into that to help the listeners understand it a little bit more thoroughly? Where generally you're seeing these roots are coming from for these children, and if there's anything that you can help give some insights to.
Yeah, absolutely. Ritalin, by the way, pretty similar to Adderall in terms of its usage and prescription. So if anywhere you think of Ritalin, you can kind of think Adderall too. They're pretty much the same in terms of their usage, but
seems counterintuitive, by the way, too. It's like the kid's got too much energy and can't sit still, and you put him or her on something which you were describing as similar to speed. I don't understand. Like you would think that would make them more hyped up.
It seems to numb them, the Ritalin, and they just they lose their appetite. They basically are numb. Yeah, they're not conscious. That's what I've seen in my nephews.
Yeah, that's not a great way to be. You're right about children. They should be free and energetic and lively and bouncing around. And, that's a whole nother conversation about like our education system and, are we doing our children a good service by sitting them down in a desk for 8 hours a day and whatnot. But well, in terms of what I see in the kids that I'm working with that come in with like behavioral disorders or attention disorders or whatever is, some of the things I mentioned before, a lot of gut imbalances. I see a lot of parasites in children. I see a lot of candida and fungal overgrowth, like really, really high levels. And so, just starting there with the gut, there's the gut-brain connection via the vagal. There's a physical connection between the gut and the brain. The gut produces neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, those have a big impact on focus and concentration and all of that. And then there's brain-derived neurotropic factors, BDNF, produced in the gut. Those help create new neurons. So a lot of your brain function comes from your gut. It's really kind of your second brain, so to speak. So if you have gut imbalances, gut inflammation, gut pathogens, gut overgrowth, that all shows up in your actual brain and causes those imbalances there too. So treating the gut is always the first place to begin. And then if you have gut issues, you're not going to get all the nutrition you should be getting, even if you're eating a perfect diet. And a lot of kids, they're not eating a perfect diet, but even if they are, they're going to have difficulty absorbing the nutrients fully in a gut that has all these overgrowths and pathogens. So they end up with all these nutritional deficiencies. And I test all my patients for all the minerals and vitamins to see where they're at. Maybe some of them are okay and we leave those alone. And then all the things they're deficient in, we can give them supplementation and food recommendations to help increase those nutrients. But yeah, omega-3 fatty acids play a huge part in helping kids with that. I like to give cod liver oil. That can help a lot with like neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, cognitive performance, and then a lot of antioxidants. A lot of these kids are highly inflamed throughout the body and in the brain. The antioxidants can help combat that. Magnesium can help a lot with the brain, reducing inflammation there. And then they've got high levels of like toxicants, and those will vary. I do pretty, extensive screenings there. So I look at dozens and dozens of different like toxic elements, including things like heavy metals. I had a child the other day who had really high levels of aluminum, that can cause issues systemically and in the brain. So clearing out metals, toxic metals, is very important. And then things like mycotoxins from mold, they cause a lot of issues systemically, and they can cross the blood-brain barrier, causing more brain issues there. So I test all my patients for mycotoxins and put them on protocols to clear those. There's a lot, the tests I run, if we do the full workup, it's like 1,000 or 2,000 markers. And, a lot of those will look good, but a lot of them won't. So we focus on whatever is not looking good in that patient, and it's different for each person. So we just treat what we see in the labs, and it's kind of a test, don't guess. Like I could sit here and say, well, this kid had these problems, so I'll do the same thing for this kid, but it's not the case. I've run enough, comparison labs. Yeah, it's not always the same story. I can just give you examples, but the broad strokes are there's going to be some gut issues, there's going to be some nutrient deficiencies, there's going to be some detox issues, there's going to be some inflammation issues, but how you differentiate and treat appropriately is to get really specific and really detailed.
Wow.
And just to finish this part of this conversation off, and I love the broad strokes, gives people a general idea. When children or adults who are on the Ritalin or the Adderall or are having issues, right, with focus, concentration, mood, depression, etc., for those that go through this protocol, do a detox, follow the supplementation, get their balance right. Are we talking this helps 5% of people, 10% of people, 50%? Like how many find an improvement through just modifying their diet rather than needing to take these pharmaceuticals in your experience?
Well, yeah. Compliance is a big part of the success, and what I do is way harder than just taking a Ritalin pill once a day, right? That's pretty easy, right? Just to take your one little pill in the morning and then live your life however you want. What I ask is a lot of lifestyle change, behavior change. Dietary changes are the hardest for most people. Taking out all the fun stuff that people are addicted to, sugar, gluten, grains, dairy, in cases of adults, alcohol, caffeine, packaged processed foods. And, I just had a patient earlier today. We were talking about her 8-year-old son, and I was emphasizing, we're going to have to take out these inflammatory foods if we want him to get better. And that was a hard conversation because, you know, kids are picky eaters enough. When you start really restricting them beyond that and they don't understand why, and it's different than what all their friends are doing, it's this whole social thing, right? And so it's challenging, like very, you know, frankly, my approach is harder. The functional holistic approach is a lot of work and, you know, a lot of effort. You have to take supplements all the time for a while. You have to change your diet and your lifestyle. And so, but if you do all that, that's what I'm kind of trying to working around to, the compliance aspect. If you do all that, you'll see improvement. Absolutely, no question. What extent you see improvement will vary by the patient, you know, and then at what pacing you get improvements varies too. I've had people contact me within a week or 2 or 3, and they're like, wow, they're doing so much better. Some people take longer, 6 months, 9 months, a year. Just depends on what we're working on, how much work there is to do, how well they're able to follow all the recommendations. But yeah, to see improvement isn't that difficult if you follow the recommendations. And then, you know, if you're just doing diet alone, that's a great place to start. Like, you don't have to book an appointment and run tons of lab work. You could just start with the diet. So my general blueprint for that is just move on to like a paleo type diet: meat, fish, vegetables, fruit, nuts, and seeds. Take out everything else: gluten, grains, dairy, sugar, vegetable oils, processed packaged foods, alcohol, caffeine. You know, taking out
What? No
the
coffee.
That's 5 tips of caffeine now. We got to bring that up.
Yeah.
So, are you saying forever?
No,
What's your
just until you're
definition?
better. Yeah, just for the healing window, right? So all these
Yeah.
changes are for the healing window. And then when you feel satisfied in your progress and you're like, wow, mission accomplished, I feel amazing, symptoms are gone, you can loosen the reins and start playing with it, make it your own, see what works, but then be honest. If you bring something back in, let's say gluten, because I think it's really bad in America at least. Let's say you bring gluten back in and all your symptoms flare up. It's kind of a choice you have to make then. Do you want to have gluten and the symptoms, or do you want to have no gluten, no symptoms? So, but yeah, I like the blank canvas point where the patient feels really healed and all their symptoms are gone. And then they can start, like I said, you know, kind of loosening the reins and seeing what works for them. Caffeine isn't the worst. You know, of all the things I listed, some people are fine with caffeine. It's not their problem. But people with like HPA axis dysfunction, thyroid disorders, chronic fatigue, a few other things, cortisol imbalances, you know, adrenal insufficiency, they probably need a break from caffeine for a while.
Yeah, and one of the things we noticed, of course, I'm going to keep referring back to visiting America, and what we noticed is the delivery method with the caffeine comes with all these add-on things.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to Starbucks, like a filtered black coffee isn't really up there on the menu. It's these frappes with caramel and milk and cream and whips and this and that and the other. And there's so much dairy and sugar and I don't know what, right? In all of these different things. I think the caffeine's the least of your worries if that's how it's getting consumed. Would you agree compared to a black coffee?
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean, there are tons of studies on coffee and its benefits. You know, there are components of coffee that are really great, and not the least of which is, you know, regularity in terms of bowel movements for a lot of people. And there's nothing better than regular bowel movements because that's a huge detox for your body. So, that's what I'm saying. Caffeine is, of the things I've listed, for some people not even a concern. Other people, for those symptoms I mentioned, it is a concern, and we have to pause it for a few months at least to regulate those systems. But yeah, it's all those add-ons, the sugars, the dairies, the chemicals, right? A lot of colorings and food preservatives and additives and all that junk that gets mixed in. And then on a side note, a lot of coffee has mold issues as well. Mold is a big thing I work on. And so I'm very cognizant of the moldy foods and drinks, and coffee is right at the top of that list. Many coffees have mold issues. So there's a couple brands that are third-party certified mold-free. Purity Coffee and Bulletproof Coffee have good mold-free options. So if you want to do coffee and, you know, you tolerate it well, and then there's a genetic aspect. Some people really process caffeine very well. Some people don't. An espresso at 11 p.m. and falling asleep shortly after, you know, that's great. They're doing well. And then other people, they have anything with caffeine at 10 a.m. and they can't sleep all night. So it depends on how well you process it too.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. But the mold thing, I only wish my mother was here to hear this right now about this mold, because she'll be pulling something out of the fridge, and if there's just scrape the mold off it, it'll be okay. It's past the use by date. Oh, don't worry about that.
They'll be right.
They'll be fine. They're just a suggestion, those dates. I go, no.
Well, if it's any consolation to her, mold from food may not be the bigger issue. For most people, it's the environmental exposure. So like a water damaged building, house with mold, house with mold issues. I'm not saying eat moldy food. And when I treat mold patients, we give them a list of moldy foods that tend to be moldy and have them avoid them. But by and large, the environmental exposure is far worse than the food exposure. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, I'd love to move on to some male issues. I saw on your Instagram and in your link tree that you had things to help, how do I word it, men with their hair care. Now, as you can see, as I'm getting older, I'm getting more hairy, not less hairy. Seems to be like just coming out of everywhere. So I don't really have an issue with hair growth, but I smiled when I saw, because I've got friends who are going far out, like I'm losing my hair or I'm really starting to go grey. And I was interested to see that there was actually protocols that you were suggesting guys could take that could help them to not only keep the hair they've got, but like fertilize it, so to speak, but also like help the color as well. Can you explain a little about that? Because there'd be a lot of people interested in that.
Yeah, well, especially the last 4 years after COVID, a lot of people were coming in with hair thinning, hair loss issues, and
I was one as well. Yeah, I noticed that.
Like I can't tell you, I had just floods of, especially female patients actually, that were so concerned about that. I'm losing so much hair. I've never, I'm in the shower, there's clumps,
Yes.
and so
and
you have to
discoloring too, Ryan, I might just add. Like the hairdressers are like, what are you washing your hair with? I'm like, nothing. It's just must be the hormones of this virus getting around,
Yeah, stress and but to treat anything in my approach, the functional approach, the Eastern approach, we're always trying to identify what the root cause is, because there may be multiple root causes for the same issue, right? So like hair loss, hair thinning, hair graying, it's not just one issue. I think the most commonly known one, especially for men, is like DHT, the androgen testosterone related hormone that can, cause hair loss or hair thinning. But especially, in women in the last 4 years, a lot of the patients I've been seeing, there's inflammation issues, there's, stress, cortisol imbalances, there's maybe autoimmune issues, there may be latent infections, nutritional deficiencies, obviously hormone imbalances. So there's a lot that could be contributing. And if you want to appropriately treat that patient, you have to figure out what their problem is to give the right solution, right? So that's where the testing comes in for me. And then when we can see, oh, you have an autoimmune condition that we have to address, or you have a stealth infection that you didn't know is there, we have to get rid of that, or you have, wow, off the charts inflammation levels, right? So all of that plays a role. And then once you know what the problem is, applying the right treatment is pretty simple.
So we'll just keep going with men and baldness and etc. And let's even go into that extreme thing where guys are digging out the hair follicles from the back and getting them injected into the front, and all sorts of crazy stuff that's going on. I don't know if you're aware of that, but like they're doing all sorts of things to deal with baldness and going grey. And I love that you're suggesting, there's things that are far less expensive and medically invasive that guys can do, right?
Definitely. I mean, the first place to start is always the basics. I think in our culture today, everyone wants to skip to the most complicated, advanced, crazy, expensive thing, and they're not doing the basics, right? So for me, and this isn't fun, nobody wants to do this, but like eliminating toxins and poisons and inflammatory substances from your life is the first place to start, because everything gets better after you do that. But for, like we were talking about before, people kind of want the quick fix. They don't want to change their life, they don't want to change their diet. And so again, it's back to philosophy, like what are your priorities? And it's really important just to understand that when you're working with a patient, if you have somebody who's here to really prioritize their health, or if they just want like a quick fix. And I don't do any quick fixes. And usually by the time people get to me, they've tried all that and it either caused a lot of side effects or it didn't work. And so they're ready for this kind of more real approach, in my opinion, at least. And yeah, so yeah, just depends on what the root cause is, pun intended, I suppose. You know, and there's a lot of approaches to take. I mean, there's so many, but yeah, there's to some degree genetic factors that aren't, you know, preventable, and it's especially in men, just something that can happen. And there's a lot we can do to support, and in some cases, you know, stop the loss or graying, especially graying hair. That's definitely possible to switch around. There's some good Chinese herbal formulas that are specifically built for that, and reducing inflammation can help too.
Yeah, it's just so, well, like my father's 70 and predominantly his hair's black, you know. He's got some gray, but not that much, and it's just kind of around on the edges. The rest of it's black, and he's never really had a drink in his life. I've never in my whole life ever seen him eat red meat, beef, lamb,
Gluten.
pork, anything like that. Doesn't have gluten.
Wow.
He's a machine.
Yeah, he's
If anything, he goes over with the vitamins, you know, those, but he's doing really well.
Yeah. But
what sent him down that path? How did he decide to live such a great, healthy life?
he was working as a chartered accountant for a large company in Sydney called Arthur Anderson. And he, on a weekend, got excited to go along to a self-help seminar that was going to help him to improve his memory, right? And to help him to be able to study better and etc. But what he found out when he went into that program was, in order to be a peak performer, you know, you've got to be able to focus and to meditate. And this was back way before anyone was talking about meditation and mindfulness, right? You know, you work it out, if he's 70-ish now, how old he would have been when he came across all of this. So everyone thought what he was talking about was fringe stuff. And one of the big areas that this guy that he was listening to spoke about was treating the brain and mind and the physical body as like a machine or a vessel. And if you run it on really good fuel, it'll work in a high performance manner for you. And based on that, he listened to this guy and, you know, changed his diet and, you know, meditated and decided to, of course, quit being an accountant. And he moved from Sydney to the Sunshine Coast, and he actually literally just lives down the road. He just helped me put out 2 pallets of turf grass, right? And sweating from nose to tail. He's full of energy. Like it's inspiring. But, you know, just he came across that information and he felt so much better. He just stuck with it all the way through life. I mean, I must say for myself, growing up, it used to drive me crazy, because sometimes all I wanted to do was go to a barbecue and have a sausage, right? Or to be able to have some sweets. There's no ice cream in the house. It was like so disappointing at Easter time when the Easter eggs were carob. It's like, what the hell's this? You know, where's the chocolate?
Well, that time when Danny's brother said that he got an ice block and was hiding out the back, eating it, and got sprung by him, and he's traumatized from that moment when he got sprung.
The look of disappointment Dad gave him that he was, you know, eating a red ice block behind the shed. But, you know, I have the benefits of that. You know, I'm going to be 50 next year. and I pretty much don't have any
Mm,
grey hairs on my head, and I'm not losing my hair, and I feel like I'm in good health because those first 15, 6 or more, 18 years of my life, I lived at home till I was older, and that was the food. Like
Mm,
literally, there was no hamburgers, there was no pizzas, there was no fries, there was no chicken nuggets, there was no
mm,
all of the things that I see now. Kids just, it's like their go-to food. If they're not having that, they're having white pasta with not even sauce on it. Some kids just want grated cheese, salt, and pasta, all right? And it's, as you were saying, white bread or the bun or the nuggets or the fries or the pizza. I mean, I'm nearly rattling and finishing things there. Maybe processed fish fingers. It's like
mhm,
some kids don't eat fruits or vegetables. So no wonder the diet is the way it is.
mm,
So yeah, I must say everything you were saying I've seen in my father, and I like see the results. You know,
mm,
he's on no medication, and
amazing.
he
mm.
goes in and, you know, he still has a fall in the, he's a massive gardener. He'll still go in and have a fall. And, you know, if he hurts, he breaks his arm or something, he, the doctors must think this guy's a nightmare, because every time they want to give him anything, he's like, "What's that? Do I really need it? You know, do I really need that?" You know, they've got to pull his arm straight to reset it or whatever. He goes, don't give me too much painkiller. You know, it's going to take me a long time to get those heavy metals out of my system." You know?
Yeah. He,
They must
he's
think,
a
"Oh my
smart
God."
guy.
Mm.
Yeah, to the point where
He's
when he's under, he wrote a script that he wanted the doctor to read to him while his conscious mind was out of it, to help his subconscious say that the bone's set beautifully and it's going to heal
wow.
very, very well. And that's what actually happened.
I love that. That's so cool. Your dad sounds awesome. I'd love to meet him.
So Ryan, let's hear about your like healing journey yourself, your personal healing journey. You sounds like you're helping and being of service to so many people, and we want to thank you for that, because I'm sure what you're doing, giving those people those codes, even this interview today, helping inspiring people with their guts and just to get started with a healthy diet, that's really good service, and it feels like you're on your path. But we all know there's an inner healing journey while we can
Mm.
go into. So how are you going with your own spiritual healing journey yourself? And is there any like plant medicine? I saw that you're an advocate, or you like to use a cannabis kind of route in some of the healing ways. That's for us, not a chemically, I guess,
Not a pharmaceutical.
not something for us that we've used. We've used other methods. So yeah, can you share us a little bit about your journey, any plant medicines that you're using to help that spirituality growth?
Yeah, I don't use cannabis personally, if that's what you
Okay.
were saying, but I have written about it because I got asked questions about it a lot by people online or patients, and I just did a lot of research into it to see what the pros and cons were and share my thoughts on both sides of it. I think there's some published benefits for certain issues that we know about, and then there's some potential drawbacks as well that we know about.
Mm,
So that was more just informational for
okay.
people. Yeah, so it's not something I personally use, but let's see. I mean, when you say plant medicine, I think of like herbalism because I'm a licensed herbalist. So I
Yeah,
think of
Yeah.
like all the herbs in the Chinese herbal pharmacopoeia, which is to me the most beautiful medicine on the planet.
I love that.
That's really, yeah. I mean, it's the original medicine. It really is.
Mm,
Like people think pharmaceuticals is medicine, right? But pharmaceuticals are like 100 years old or something, or maybe a little
mm,
more than that. But the Chinese herbal pharmacopoeia has been around for 5,000 years, for instance, in Ayurvedic plant medicine. And, a lot of those are the same ones in Chinese herbal medicine. So these are the original medicine, and a lot of even the pharmaceuticals, the compounds that are the active compounds in pharmaceuticals are derived from these plants. So yeah, I think I hold great reverence for plant medicine above all else. And going through school, I loved learning about each herb. more than anything else, and what it can do. I think it's amazing. Like, all the answers are there. Everything's provided for us within nature if we're wise enough to find it and seek it and use it. And I still use, Chinese herbal formulations all the time in my own life every single day, and in my patients' protocols. Those are usually included. So yeah, I hold more reverence for plant medicine than probably anything. I think it's amazing. And the people who discovered them, I think it's so cool. Like, the stories you hear, like, because 5,000, 3,000, 2,000 years ago, we didn't have like labs that were analyzing the chemical compounds in these plants, where they were just ingesting them and seeing what happened, and some people died doing it, of course, but a lot of the pharmacopoeia was written just from that, like, sitting in meditation and consuming these plants and seeing what happened. Like, on the topic of hair growth, right? So Husha Wu is the famous Chinese herb for darkening of hair if you have gray hair, thickening of hair if you're losing hair, things like that. And so there's a story, if you go through like Eastern medicine or training for herbalism in Eastern medicine and Chinese herbs, they always tell you, it's like the most famous story. Dr. Wu, I think, because it's named Husha Wu, was kind of like an aging man in the village, and he's getting gray, and nobody wanted to be around him, and nobody wanted to be his friend. I'm butchering the story, but this is the gist of it. And so he kind of like was cast off into the woods, and he started eating this root, and his hair went from gray to black, and he like returned a young, vibrant man with dark hair. And that was like how that root was named after him, because he discovered it and it darkened his hair. So now there's a whole formula built around that, and it's a pretty popular herb. Like, you'll even see it at some health food stores and tonic drinks. Husha Wu is a pretty kind of popular herb. But yeah, just like the way that they were discovered and passed down through time. That's the thing, is like, are we gonna have Ritalin in 5,000 years? Probably not. But we have these herbs that have been here for longer than we have been, probably, and we've been using them, at least the Chinese herbs I'm referring to, for thousands of years. And that's a pretty good trial and error. Things don't stick around if they're dangerous that long, and things don't stick around that long if they're not effective. So 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years of trial and error is pretty good.
Yeah, and you must smile when people bring out turmeric, the latest thing. Oh, it's the best thing. Blah, blah, blah. You just go, oh, that old thing, or they're talking about chlorella, the superfood, or spirulina, or whatever it may be. And I remember when I used to go to my Chinese herbalist, there was so many jars. Like, I'd wonder how the heck he knew how to mix this with that, with whatever, and give her this little bag of what tasted like mud. I've never had a particularly pleasant Chinese medicine, but later finding out, I'd been taking turkey tail mushroom for years and just didn't know what it was called, or reishi mushroom, just didn't know what it was called, right? And then now that people are like, oh, these are the thing, these mushrooms, but Chinese herbalists have been prescribing them to people for thousands of years, and now it's really just marketing that's bringing some of them to the more mainstream, right?
100% right. And there was a time I didn't know what any of these things were either. It wasn't until I went through school and learned it all, and then since then, and especially because the past, at least in my observation, 5 to 10 years seem to be kind of a big explosion in kind of health and wellness, and these types of people are more interested in these types of things. And social media, I think, is helping spread things like that. And that's a place where a lot of that happens. Something goes viral, and it's like an herb from 3,000 years ago, and it's like going viral now, and that's cool to me. Like, I'm glad something like that would be gaining, attention. And so people are learning about some of these more common herbs, ashwagandha, reishi, like you said, a lot of the adaptogenic herbs and the immune boosting mushrooms, and they're kind of being picked and plucked by companies, and then they're putting out their product. Like, the thing I get asked about all the time is colostrum, because of a company that is doing a lot of marketing for a colostrum product right now. And boy, if I ever put a product out, I'm hiring that marketing company because everybody's buying it, everybody's asking about it. And colostrum is, I mean, it comes from breast milk, so it's as old as breast milk, right? So it's nothing new under the sun, but it's being marketed and people are highlighting its benefits in a way that get people very interested, as if it's a cure-all for everything.
Ryan, one of the things I want to ask you that I've noticed is like when we're working a lot with trying to help a person who wants to meditate deeper, or they want to turn on their intuition, or they want to, let's call it, raise their vibration, feel better within mind, body, spirit. They often go through a lot of these protocols that you're recommending generally, broad stroke. They do a heavy metal detox, right? They modify their diet, making sure that it's what we use the term, it's high vibrational. It's got a lot of life force, a lot of energy in the food. And then of course they're taking time for self-reflection, meditation, self-care, etc. And a lot of people notice their intuition starts to actually turn on. They actually notice when they meditate, oh my gosh, I actually feel like I'm connecting to my higher self, or I'm feeling more present in my day-to-day. Little things don't irritate me so much. So this concept of healthy body, healthy mind, or in a way your inner world reflects your outer world. Do you notice patients sometimes talking about this as an unexpected side effect of wanting to work on some sort of health condition? It's like their general well-being improves as well, mentally, emotionally.
So, you're correct about all of that. That's so absolutely true. And I experienced that myself as well earlier when I was speaking about, my own healing journey and being sick and going through my healing process and just this expansion and, evolution of my consciousness and, connection to everything. And I really did experience that, as many people do who clean up their internal environment. You just kind of like tune yourself to the frequency of the universe, and you get a lot of downloads and information from that, and things become much clearer. What I've seen with my patients is, and this is purely my opinion and observation, but with kind of unbeknownst to them, blockages in their life become unblocked. And what I'll see is people come in with these health issues, and then we do the tests, we put on a treatment plan, and we start to clear things out and, replete things that are deficient and just balance that internal environment. And then we're doing our check-ins, along the way, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever it is. And like, they'll give me updates on their life, and it's like, just they'll kind of, so what's new, they'll kind of casually tell me about their symptoms, and then they'll kind of slip in like, oh, and I ended my relationship, and it was a very toxic relationship that they'd been stuck in for a long time, or like, I quit my job and I'm pursuing, something new that I'm passionate about. Like, these changes that I don't think they associate with the fact that they probably wouldn't have made that change if they didn't do that internal work first. And they just think it's like a coincidence, but to me, I'm like, that happened because you did this other work first, right? To put you in position to feel strong enough, to feel guided enough, to feel clear enough, to know your path, and the right thing to do. And maybe you were, holding back on doing that because there was too much stuff you had to do internally first before you could make that big of a change. So I see that all the time, and I love that. And it's not often that the patient puts that together. I just kind of observe it, and that's my opinion, and they could disagree, of course, but that's what I think. So I love to see that, because for me, that's like finding your alignment and finding your path. And I think that starts with, almost the easier part is the physical part, the psycho-spiritual, emotional stuff. That's heavy, hard work. And if I can help them get the body in shape first, that helps, at least in my opinion, it helps that higher level energy for them to be able to focus on that next.
Yeah, and this is very much helpful to the sort of audience that we have here for Elevated Conversations, because often they are people who actually have the intent. So in other words, they want to change their outer world. They know that there's things that they could do to influence it. And I think that this conversation is going to be very helpful in helping them to really understand that physically, when they do a detox, you know, when they exercise and get their lymphatic system moving, the body's waste disposal center, right, burning off the dead cells and getting everything moving and vitalized. And when they supplement, when they are aware of their diet and do this in conjunction with the intention to want to connect more to their higher self, to get more downloads, like this is the physical manifestation of so much more to what we are. You know, so often people think, I am just my physical body. Yet there's the mental body, the emotional body, and then there's the soul that resides within this vehicle. And activity in our physical body is how we communicate with this 3D part of us, right? The physical part of us. And we can make choices that make this physical part of us vibrate at a higher level. And when this part of us is vibrating at a higher level and we're vibrant and high energy and in good health, it stands to reason that your mental health improves, your emotional health improves, your spiritual connection improves. So if all of those parts of the being are vibrating high, then we start to have manifestations of that in our environment and what's going on around us through, you know, the organizing principle of synchronicities. We're attracting things into the right place at the right time. The example I love that you gave, relationships that just no longer serve us drop away. Jobs that are draining and uninspired can easily drop away. And we start to move more into a vibration of health and happiness. And you're certainly a great representation of that in, listen, the work that you do. And like Roxy and I really want to just like commend you on how, yes, you're helping people with the physical body, but then also how in the bigger picture, you're helping them sort of bring together these other aspects of life, whether they know it or not. But we know, and I just wanted to really say, you know, thank you for the work that you're doing. And do you do Zoom calls? Like, what if someone in Australia wanted to work with you, or someone who's watching this perhaps in New York or Colorado or wherever they are? Are you able to work with clients remotely?
Yeah, I do. I have video conference appointments where we can meet and speak like a Zoom. It's all through my EHR service, which is HIPAA compliant and all of that, but it's just like a Zoom, right? So yeah, I meet with patients and discuss their health via video conference appointments. If they want to do that, they can book those through my website. So yeah, happy to work with people wherever they may be.
And do you have any upcoming workshops? Like, how do people find you? Share with them your Instagram handle. Of course, it'll be in the comments below, but let's just, to finish off, really make it super easy for people if they're inspired and they'd love to connect.
Thank you. Yeah, Instagram is at Dr. Ryan Monahan, so DrRyanMonahan, and then my website is Peaceful Mountain Medicine, and you can find everything on that website, including my Instagram. That's kind of, you know, where I'm active, if at all, is on Instagram, not really any place else. But yeah, mainly focused on working with patients these days, and happy to help anybody out there that feels like they are wanting something different than the conventional approach. This is a good alternative to explore if you haven't found success in the conventional landscape.
Yeah. And I'm sure today, through this really interesting conversation, we will be reaching a lot of people who, what we spoke about at the end there, are motivated to take steps to not just, this is the bit I love, to not just fix something that's wrong, but rather elevate so that they can be more, connect more, and enjoy more. You know, it's one thing to work on yourself when it's broken down. It's a whole
Mm.
nother thing when you go along and see someone such as yourself and go, you know what? Nothing's wrong. I'm in pretty good health. Let's turn me into a high performance
Race
physical
car.
vessel. Turn me into a race car, right? You know,
Gosh.
is that a fair comment? Do you enjoy that as much as working on an issue?
Yeah, it's like health optimization. I use that word a lot,
Oh, I
optimizing
like
people's
that.
health. I mean, yeah, right. And so I do work with people who have been chronically ill for years or decades. And then I work with like Olympic athletes and like high performing
Mm.
CEOs and, things like that. And people that want that extra edge, they're really at the top of their game and they want to stay there and even elevate a little more, right? So you don't have to be chronically ill or have some acute, terrible, miserable symptom. I work with patients that are wanting to explore deeper anything they can do to support themselves. And yeah, it's a good way to do that. The labs we run just go so much deeper. The conventional stuff is pretty superficial, CBC metabolic panel, it's pretty basic, and what we're doing is far deeper.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ryan. It was really nice to share time with you. We're excited for all of our listeners to dance through all the topics that we've chatted about today. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so great to meet you both, and I love talking to you. Thank you so much for having me.